Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at dueling announcements this weekend. One about the Nigerian Islamist radical sect Boko Haram pledging allegiance to ISIS. The other by troops from Chad and Niger, neighboring states, who said they were starting an offensive. They were true to their word. That offensive underway near to the west of Lake Chad, for those of you who know that part of the world. With us to talk about it from Calabar, Nigeria, journalist Philip Obaji, founder of the One Game campaign. Here in the studio, Hanan Ferjani, journalist from Niger. Thank you for being with us. Former UN General Dominique Trinquant, and Jose Luengo Cabrera of the European Union Institute for Security Studies. There is a union in that.
There is.
In the slum. Correcting myself wrong there. We know where you are. Last week, Chad's president warning Boko Haram's leader to surrender or else.
Abubakar
Shekau was lucky. He was in Dikwa during the attack. He fled, but we know where he is. He must surrender, or he will face the same fate that his comrades did in Dikwa.
Hanan Ferjani, what's your reaction to that?
Well, that just basically shows that it's really a war of communication, not just a war in the battlefield.
Because we don't know how much of that is bluffed.
Yeah, exactly, which is also probably also the case with Boko Haram, and maybe the fact that they've pledged allegiance to the IS group is also part of their strategic propaganda, just telling the world, okay, we're a bigger fish than you think we are, and you should actually be scared because we're going to get proper support. So.
Philip Obaji, you're saying that with your group, you work a lot in northeast Nigeria. Among the locals, this pledge of allegiance to ISIS, how will it go down?
There's already some kind of reaction in many parts of Borno State, there in the northeast. I spoke to a couple of people, 2 days ago, and one resident told me that he's seen a couple of politicians vow to take their families away from Maiduguri, And before now, we've had a situation where, the government announced that ISIS were in the country looking to recruit young people into their fold. So that anxiety and some kind of fugitive has been in northeastern Nigeria, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see some elites leave that particular region. Well, I'm also aware, I've been told that one or two elites have moved their families away from Borno State. They don't want a situation where their children will end up becoming members of ISIS. Nigeria's former Chief Justice, Muhammadu Lawal Owais, last week had news that his second son, Ibrahim, was already in Syria fighting for ISIS. So if you see a situation where an influential man like Muhammadu Owais will see his son team up with ISIS, then you want to fear that anyone could be victim of children going to Syria to fight for ISIS. So there's fear in most parts of the northeastern region. Some elites say we cannot keep our children here. We don't want a situation where they become targets of ISIS and then move up to Syria to fight for the group.
So listening to Philip there, Jose Luengo Cabrera, we shouldn't underestimate the impact that such an announcement can have.
No, I mean, I wouldn't underestimate it. The only thing is we shouldn't over-exaggerate it. But one thing to be clear is that these states are under emergency states, which means that there is more military to be deployed in both Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. In that sense, it hasn't prevented Boko Haram from carrying out attacks, and they have so in Maiduguri, which is the main city, which is the capital city of Borno. And the intention, obviously, is to move towards Maiduguri to really establish the caliphate there. At the moment, their fiefdom is in Goza, but given their presence across the three northeastern states, we should never undermine the capacity of Boko Haram to attack and indeed to be continuously be able to recruit, I would say.
Dominique Trinquant, is it one of these perverse effects of globalization now? You had Al-Qaeda with all sorts of groups pledging allegiance to it, and now the same thing happening with ISIS? Or is it simply just a brand that's being borrowed? West Africa is very far from Iraq and Syria.
Yeah, yes, it's very far, but I think that the threat at the strategic level, it's exactly the aim of this threat, is to have an overview of all the Muslims against, say, the Western ideas. And either you are in Middle East or in Libya or in center of Africa, there is no difference. So I think this is really the danger for the people, the free-minded, I mean, say, people who knows that here you've got a real threat of people who wants to fight you. We never decided to fight them. They decided to fight. And this leader wants to win a war. And so that's why we've got to battle back and to win this war. That's why.
Wants to win a war and wants to draw in the West?
Yes, they want to draw the West, certainly. Certainly, that's the strategy of Daesh, you know. Having flying aircraft is not sufficient for them. They want to fight because they know that when the West will fight in Iraq, it will be the start of a new war where they can win, because we will not support the number of wounded or killed that they will support. So this is the way they want to fight a war.
Already we see for the retaking of this town, 10 Chadian soldiers killed. That's according to the Chadians. Yeah. Lots of wounded. How do people in Niger, in Chad, feel about it?
I think in Niger, at least, especially the Difa region that's been in state of emergency for almost a month now, 3 weeks, there's a climate of terror. People are living in psychosis because, I mean, a lot of people fled the Difa region when the first attacks happened in the beginning of February, and it became a ghost town for a few days there. And the threat is real, and people have been living under this threat even before it came into Niger, because so many people, refugees from Nigeria, had been coming from Nigeria to Niger, and now that's why it's an important humanitarian crisis, because even the displaced from Nigeria have been displaced again, and there are new refugees inside the country. So it's a really big deal for Niger. It's a really big deal for Chad. And sorry, go on.
I was going to say that the part of it, there's the fear, obviously, of the fighting, especially for a border area like the one you're describing. Yeah. But we also see that there are some in the population who are sympathetic to these ideas. Back in January, when there was a backlash against the cartoons in Charlie Hebdo, we saw the black flag of ISIS in Niger in demonstrations, and we saw the burning of Christian churches in the city of Zander.
It's true, and there are parts of like in some towns in Niger, in Zander namely, and also maybe even in Niamey, people who will feel who do feel sympathetic to Boko Haram's message, or maybe generally the IS group's message. But I think maybe let's not blow this out of proportion. Even in Niger, you'll have among the civil society people who will feel sympathetic to them, but also even in the youth, people who are very opposed to what Boko Haram has done recently. That was 3 weeks ago. That's something that I found pretty impressive. There were 3 youngsters, four, that released a video and that went viral, where they were just mirroring Baba Bakr Shiko's doings in his videos, and they were threatening him directly. So you'll have both trends in the young generation. But I think to add to what Dominique Trinquant said earlier, the strength of the IS group of Daesh is that it's been able to instill a sense of purpose and belongings in young, impressionable minds, and that's something that you can do regardless of if it's in Europe or Africa. Because if people feel as though they're marginalized or they're unemployed and they're easily, they can be easily convinced of such a message, I think.
Jose, on this point. It's sort of like a slow motion car crash, it seems. We've seen this thing build and build and build.
Well, I mean, you could see the expansion of Daesh, IS. It's gone from its epicenter in Iraq and Syria over to Egypt and Libya, and now supposedly in Nigeria. the way I see it, at least for the Nigeria case, and given the distance that separates Boko Haram and Daesh, is possibly Boko Haram to become an IS proxy. So it would go under its operational umbrella maybe and receive financing, but no more than that, at least at the time being, given that it might require deploying IS representatives on the ground, which I see unlikely at the time being. But having said that, it's the creation of a franchise. You have more and more groups allying to IS, which means it's become the leading global jihadist movement, overtaking Al Qaeda by far. Which is we should be concerned in that sense, and take all the cautious measures possible to try to counter the expansion of such armed groups.
All right, reaction from Ali on Twitter that what is this Pledge of Allegiance shows the strengthening for ISIS's ideology in West Africa. Soon expected East Africa is the claim. Of course, we've seen with the Shabab militias in Nairobi and elsewhere in Kenya. That already there's a streak there. Philip Obaji, your thoughts on the way you're going to win back hearts and minds in the northeast of Nigeria?
Well, it is going to be very difficult. This is a region where the people of that region have lost confidence in government. Right now, Nigeria is looking to countries like Chad, like Niger, to help us defeat Boko Haram. It's going to take some time for lots of people to believe that this war can be won soonest. And as a matter of fact, very few people are convinced that Nigeria can have most of its territory back before the March 28 elections. But for some people who want to keep faith with what the multinational forces are doing, they are hoping that in no time Boko Haram can be defeated. And if we see more of Western involvement in the fight against Boko Haram, I believe that it will go a long way in bringing back some belief and some confidence in the people. A situation where thousands of people or millions of people will be away from their original place of base and finding how they're fitted, how to survive out of their homes. It's alarming and disturbing. And people are just looking for where that succor will come from. There's a bit of hope, no doubt, with the progress made by the multinational forces fighting in the region, but it is going to take a long, long time for that confidence to return back to the people of northeastern Nigeria.
In the winning the hearts and minds, I think there's a really important comparison to be made with Mali, because we are talking about two northern regions that have been historically marginalized economically, socially, and politically. And putting in context Boko Haram, it didn't emerge as a violent armed group. And its fight has always been against the Nigerian state out of allegations that simply the Nigerian state has not been delivering the sort of public services that is delivering in the south. So in that sense, there is a huge role to be played by the Nigerian government, whether it's Buhari or Goodluck Jonathan who wins the next elections, in the sense of at least pledging more economic assistance to the north, at least pledging more military presence in the event that Boko Haram is not completely eradicated. And in that sense, at least show some sign that the Nigerian state will be more focused on delivering, which is really about delivering public goods in the marginalized north.
And yet, Philip Obaji, it's not been the #1 campaign issue most of the time. It's often been absent from the front pages throughout the campaign period.
Well, both major frontrunners in the campaign have been talking a lot about what they will do in defeating Boko Haram. General Buhari, the main opposition in the forthcoming elections, have accused his counterpart, President Jonathan, of not doing enough in combating Boko Haram. He said he cannot imagine how the Nigerian military that has won battles in Congo, in Syria alone, in Liberia, all of a sudden cannot protect its own territory. But it is not mostly of marginalization, so to speak, because in Nigeria we've had presidents from northern Nigeria stay in office much more than those from southern Nigeria. In fact, it's the first time we're having, our president or the southern region of Nigeria control power for a long time. Before now, we've had northern presidents who lost in Nigeria. It's just a matter of ideas, ideologies, and priorities. it is very easy to talk to people in the North, use religion to convince people to go against what is right. But it is one area that we expect to see a swing, so to speak, because whoever tells us better that he can defeat this insurgency, perhaps is the man that we will look at becoming the next president of Nigeria.
You mentioned what the words there of the former general there, Buhari, who's one of the main candidate for the opposition. General Trinquant, our correspondent, telling us earlier that the official spokesman for the Nigerian military now is painting this as the Nigerians calling the shots and leading the attack against Boko Haram.
Yes, it's the usual wording. I remember that a few weeks ago they claimed that the leader of Boko Haram was killed. Mm-hmm. So it's the usual wording, but what's happened on the ground? And I agree that the military solution is only part of the issue. You've got to kill the leader. No way. You've got to kill them because they were leading these young people to fight because these young people have no future. So they took them, give them weapons, and they are at the back. So you need to kill them. So President Debe is right. Be careful, I know where you are, and I will kill you if you don't surrender. And that's not only in Nigeria, it's, for Daesh it's the same. These young people have no future. So as soon as you've killed the leader, then you must solve the problem. And the problem is not military. The problem is to provide them with a future.
To provide them with a future. At this point in time, Hanan Farjani, I mean, Niger is, that area just across the border is just as poor, if not even poorer. Mm-hmm. So what is the solution there? These are areas that are forgotten.
I think, well, what Dominique Trinquant really said is really important. For Niger, the issue is a security issue, but it's also a poor country and a developing country that's developing very slowly. So this is affecting it, and that's why the Nigerian government has decided to go across the border to defeat Boko Haram, because it's a huge threat for the country that is already underdeveloped. But also, what I think is important to bear in mind is that the Sahel region generally is a soft spot for instability and terrorism factions to grow. We've seen it through a number of cases, such as in the Libyan aftermath with Niger and Chadian mercenaries fighting in the war, and that came back, and also all the weapons trafficking in the region. That shows just how porous the borders are between these countries, and just how big the threat is. It's bigger now with Boko Haram going beyond borders.
I would also highlight on top of that there are economic interests at stake. But I mean, I speak at least for Cameroon in the far north region. It's actually a region that depends 80% on food inputs from Nigeria, and Nigeria is the biggest trading partner of the region. It's also host of a national park where they welcome many tourists a year, which means the region is actually taking a hit as a result of Boko Haram. And Lake Chad, most importantly, fishery industry is being interrupted by closure of borders because they can no longer trade with Nigeria, but also the Lake Chad basin having oil wells and an oil pipeline going from Chad to Cameroon. So these are things that obviously Presidents Deby and Biya take into consideration, because Boko Haram has become a threat in terms, in the economic sphere. So it's about protecting their economic interests as well.
So has Boko Haram overplayed its hand then by drawing in the Chadians?
Yes, I think for a long time Boko Haram was just a threat inside Nigeria. And when it was a threat inside Nigeria, everybody was looking and doing nothing. Yeah. But as soon as they crossed the border of Chad, unlike Chad, or in Cameroon, or in Niger now, they just push a bit too far. And now the people are retaliating. They formed a multinational force, and I think that it's very bad news for Boko Haram. And good news if Nigeria now is jumping in this multinational force and making the effort, perhaps after the election, in economical terms for this region.
After the election, Philip Obaji, so it's going to be suspended decision-making time until then?
Well, right now, the focus in Nigeria is on the election. President Jonathan wants to do everything possible to win. His main challenger is trying to unseat him. But no one is talking about anything else but APC, the main opposition party, and PDP, the ruling party. So a lot of talk about Boko Haram, about the future of Nigeria, mostly is outside Nigeria. Here in Nigeria, the focus is on who wins the 2015 election, the March elections. So there is not much focus on anything else but who gets into power. The issues with Boko Haram, I don't think has so much to do with the economical issues. I think it has to do a lot with control of power. I think it has to do a lot with terrorism as well. It is unlike what we saw in southern Nigeria some time ago, where the Niger Delta militants were trying to gain control of their own resources. They were fighting for the cause. They believed that the people of the Niger Delta region had suffered for too long. The oil in Nigeria comes from that region, and the people were losing a lot. So they were fighting to ensure that the people do not get marginalized again. But for Boko Haram, it's more or less trying to make a territory an Islamic, caliphate, and it's more or less trying to control power as far as Nigeria is concerned. So it has not much to do with whether or not the government has developed that area. Right. It's just some people believing that they have to share in the government and in governance.
Jose Luengo Cabrera, very brief final word.
I think we need to look at the integrity of the elections in terms of Boko Haram being an electoral spoiler. It's going to undermine the vote in the north. And that might actually undermine the electoral prospects of the APC, because its stronghold is in the north. So,
we shall see that vote scheduled for March the 28th. I want to thank you. I want to thank as well Hanan Farjani,
thank you.
Dominique Trinquant, and Philippe Obadji for being with us from Nigeria today, from Calabar. Thank you. Stay with us, though, because our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Good evening, Francois. Hello to everybody. And just looking at how this issue has been covered across the media since the announcement this weekend, Francois, the French news weekly on their website, L'Express, say that it's between a publicity stunt, if you like, a coup de communication, and the scenario of a catastrophic scenario. So it seems that the media are trying to figure out, is it one or is it the other, or is it something in between? And if you look at other headlines, it seems that a lot of opinions are falling down on the side of it being more a propaganda coup than anything else. This is an article in the LA Times. Boko Haram's pledge is seen as a propaganda coup for the Islamic State, they're saying here. Elsewhere, the Associated Press, Michelle Fall, saying that it's actually a propaganda boost for both Boko Haram and the Islamic State in her analysis. And she also, in that article, there's talk of it being a recruiting tool for Boko Haram in Nigeria, although some doubts about the logistical support that Islamic State can provide given the geographical challenges. I mean, this being completely different zones, parts of Iraq and Syria compared to northern Nigeria. Similar opinions being expressed in this article in the New York Times, which talks about the practical significance of the move not being clear, and Islamic State leaders having, very little potential for direct control given the distance involved. Meanwhile, The Atlantic's Scott Stewart says that it's a sign of weakness. Scott Stewart, speaking to The Atlantic, rather, speaks of this as a sign of weakness, Francois, and desperation, and an attempt to boost members' morale and attract local support. And I suppose it's just worth pointing out that the writing was in some ways on the wall when we saw a video of beheadings being released by Boko Haram earlier this month, very much incorporating the style of the Islamic State, and even a Twitter account being opened back in January. All of this echoing, I suppose, the Islamic State's social media use over the past year or so.
All right, many thanks, James Creedon. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.